So, Cam, welcome to Sail Faster. I'm really thrilled to have you on our series.
Thanks. I'm stoked to be here. Really appreciate it.
You're calling from Florida, right?
Yeah, I'm home. I'm in Destin, Florida, which is pretty close to Pensacola.
So, did everything went right?
Yeah, no, for the most part, everything went right. The boat all held together just fine. And yeah, had good starts most of the regatta and just tried to stay really consistent, which was good.
You have an amazing sailing resume for, if I can say, for somebody so young, it's just ridiculous. So,
Thank you.
how did it get started? How do you get started in this?
Yeah, so I was pretty fortunate to grow up somewhere where sailing is so easy. Being in Northwest Florida, we could sail year round, and my dad was a big sailor. He sailed like multi-hulls, so mostly trimarans. And I had sailed with him always since I was little, but never really competitively until I was 16 or 17. So I always kind of felt like I was a bit late to the competitive sailing game compared to like everyone else who sailed opties growing up and everything. But yeah, I always did a lot of catamaran sailing, multi-hull stuff, a lot of weta trimarans. That was kind of my version of the opti. So I sailed that since I was probably like 8 or 10 with my dad. Love the boat. The best memory I have on the weta was one day my dad sailed me out to the middle of the bay. So he was on the trimaran with me on the weta, and I was crewing for him. And my dad always thought it was very important that I learned how to drive the boat because women often don't get as much opportunity to helm the boat. So he was like, you really need to learn how to drive. And I was like, no, I don't want to do it. I'm like, I don't know, 10 years old, 8 years old. And he's got a 6-pack of beer and he wedges himself into the middle of the wetted trimaran underneath the boom, and he cracks open a beer and he looks at me and he says, "Well, kid, I'm drunk. You got to get me to land." And I was like, "Oh my God, no. Like, he's going to die. I'm not going to be able to get him in all safe." And I was freaking out, but I eventually sailed him in fine. And that kind of started the whole beginning of driving boats and racing boats, really.
You raced obviously in college, didn't you?
Yep.
You're
Yeah.
Tulane, right, in New Orleans. That's another big sailing area.
Yes. Yeah, I was super fortunate to get recruited to Tulane. So we were the first group of varsity athletes at Tulane. So
Hmm.
this wonderful donor gave a ton of money to the Tulane sailing program. And I mean, we were treated the same as the football team there. It was incredible to have that
Yeah.
many resources. We won nationals my senior year, and yeah, it was great. Really
Wow.
enjoyed that.
So, where are you now in your sailing career? I can see from what I know about you from your resume and sort of what you're famous for is foiling. Is is that where you're going with your career? Do you think foiling and obviously we need to talk about SailGP and sailing with Jimmy Spithill. I can't wait to talk to you about that. But where sort of are you in your sailing career right now?
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say. I mean, I've done, I feel like so much over the past, 2 years since graduating college that I'm trying to really decide what my main focus is going to be. And for me, like right now, the ACAT is my absolute favorite boat that I'm sailing. And it's one of those boats that I feel like over time I can really get to the top of that podium. So I'm putting a lot of emphasis on focusing on worlds every year for the ACAT, and I've been steadily moving up that scoreboard. I head down to, I guess, over to Italy in the fall for the next world championship. But yeah, I'm focusing a lot on just racing a ton and focusing on, the kind of sailing that makes me happy, not getting burnt out, and yeah, foiling as much as I can, of course.
Yeah. So you were 16th in the world, is that right?
Yep, I think so. That was in Toulon, France. So I was the top woman, top under 25, top youth for that world, and then the same for the previous year world in Houston.
How did you do in the previous worlds for the ACAT?
Yeah, so this past worlds was in Toulon, France, and I was the top female finisher in the foiling fleet, and then the top under 25 junior. I think I was like 16th. And then the year before was in Houston, and I was top female and top junior again. But I mean, the goal is just to keep climbing up, break into the top 10, top 5, and just see what I can really do in that fleet, which is cool.
History as there is on many of the keelboat classes. So, are you finding you're pushing boundaries on foiling and how it works?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like with foiling, every time you go out, you learn something new, right? Or your body just, you create muscle memory, right? Like the foil starts to feel like this is how the boat's going to react. So I feel like there's a lot more daily innovation, and maybe the gains that we're making in foiling knowledge are a bit bigger than traditional knowledge on normal keel boats and stuff, because those have been sailed for so long, and it's harder to make really big changes in understanding about the boat. But yeah, I feel like every time I go out, I'm learning a ton, and so much of it is just trial and error. Like, I'm the biggest believer. I care a lot about like safety on foiling boats and stuff, especially double-handed foiling boats, because you're obviously like in charge of taking care of your crew, right? And everyone's lives can be put at risk if something goes wrong. And I really feel like foiling skippers of multi-handed, like multi-person boats, they should really sail a single-handed foiling boat. So for me, like sailing the ACAT by myself, I've wiped that boat out every way imaginable. You know what I mean? Like, I've crashed that thing, I've eaten shit, drank water, because I was learning the boat, right? And I was understanding how it reacts. And I think it's important to understand and learn these things alone without anyone else on the boat, that way everyone's kept safe. And to me, that's important, just to spend one-on-one time with the foiling boat and understanding how everything works, because there is no guidebook, and even if there was a guidebook, I mean, foiling is so changing all the time. It wouldn't really work for everyone.
You sail a variety of boats you talked about. Do you have a favorite? Is your ACAT your favorite?
Yeah, the ACAT's definitely my favorite boat. I mean, the Weta's up there just because it was such a great boat to learn on. Like, it's just very accessible. There's some parasailing on it as well. But the ACAT, at this stage in my life, and honestly onwards, we've got guys winning regattas at 79, 80 years old on the non-foiling version of the ACATs. But
Yeah.
it's just the most amazing boat. The way it just goes through the water, even in non-foiling mode, is just amazing. I mean, they're so well built. They're so fast. I mean, they're sail up, mast up, everything. They weigh 160 pounds. They're all
Wow.
carbon fiber. They are
Yeah.
so fast. And yeah, I love the ACAT. Most favorite boat ever.
Can you control? I know they're on SailGP and America's Cup. They control. Can you control the ride height from?
Yeah. So one of the reasons I love the ACAT is because the ride height is controlled by body weight and sail trim. So when I'm sailing the ACAT or NACRA 17, the Olympic boat, is very similar. When we're sailing any kind of those foiling catamarans, there's no wand controlling the ride height. Like, literally, your body movement and your sail trim and your steering is controlling everything. So you develop this amazing understanding of how the foil is working. You're anticipating stuff really, really quickly. And that, to me, sailing other foiling boats, like I've done a little bit of Moth and then some 69F stuff as well. Like, if the wand didn't work on the Moth, I would understand how it reacted, versus some other sailors who are always used to having the ride height controlled for them. They miss out on understanding just that relationship and how important it is.
The foiling is the future of sailing, that everything is going to be foiling. It's that sort of generational step change, or will it just be a one option like windsurfing, keel boats, and catamarans and so on?
Yeah, I think foiling, hopefully, and it should become more accessible for more people, but I don't think it will ever become the most mainstream part of sailing. It might be the most like televised part of sailing, or the coolest part to watch, because it is interesting to watch. But I love displacement sailing. I love foiling sailing. I think there's the right place for both of them, and I think they both require really good sailors. But I don't think it would ever replace displacement boats. I kind of think about sailing kind of like biking. There's like road cyclists, and then there's mountain bikers. Like, there's different, it's all riding a bike. There's guys just like cruising on their bike through the park. There's all different aspects of it. It's all biking, it's all sailing, but there's different stuff for different people, which is good.
So, Cam, we have to talk about SailGP. So, how did that happen for you?
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. It all started with there's this awesome pro sailor named Kinley Fowler who's incredible, and if you ever have the chance to meet him, or maybe you could do a show with him, he's one of the best sailors in the world. But I met him in Newport. I was foiling NACRA 17, so I was training with the US Olympic squad, and I had my ACAT up there. And he had his Moth, so he would go out and sail his Moth every day. And I would sail my ACAT in the morning and my NACRA in the afternoons. So I was sailing all day long during the summer. And the day I was supposed to leave Newport, a text message pops up on my phone at like 8 o'clock at night. And he's like, hey, we need someone to come out and drive Convexity, which is an M32, for a practice day. And I was like, oh man, like, shoot, I'm supposed to leave town. Like, I don't know if I can do it. And then I was like, no, I got to do it. Like, I'd love to sail an M32. So he brought me out with the guys. And like, that was an incredible experience racing those boats. It was so cool. And then flash forward a few months, I'm sailing Moths with American Magic, and I'm on the coach boat with Tom Burnham, who's the coach of American Magic. And WhatsApp pops up on my phone, and it says, hi, this is Jimmy. Are you available to come to Christchurch? And it was like 3 weeks notice or something. It's like, are you available to come to Christchurch to race with us? Kinley Fowler recommended you. And so I texted Kinley and I was like, is this real, or like, is this like a scammer or something? You know, like, it doesn't really seem real. There's no profile picture on his WhatsApp. Like, this is kind of weird. Kinley's like, no, it's legit. Like, Erica had hurt her ankle, the previous strategist on the boat. So they needed someone to fill in. I was like, oh shit, okay. So the next thing I know, I'm in New Zealand, which I'd never been to New Zealand. I'd never been at all over there, and I'd always wanted to go. Longest plane ride of my entire life. Couldn't believe it. I showed up, and you know, we're doing all the safety training, and we're seeing the boats, and I'm meeting all these insane people who I've looked up to. I mean, like, I can't believe it. It's like watching a movie, like introducing myself to Tom Slingsby, you know, and Spithill's there. And next thing I know, I'm doing safety training, and for safety training, we keep the spare air canisters on us. So it's basically like a tiny scuba tank. And if you get trapped underneath the boat, you're able to have a few breaths, you know, to get calm. And then you have a few more breaths to swim out if something really bad happens, so no one drowns. And for safety training, you jump in, you put the canister on, and this like really big, strong special forces guy is like kind of holding you underwater, you know, to teach you not to panic when you've got the little spare air thing. And I look up and I'm like, oh my God, that's Glenn Ashby, who's like an ACAT legend. Like, he's won worlds, I don't know, like an insane amount of time. I've looked up to him forever. I look up, I'm like, Glenn, oh my God, I've always wanted to meet you. And the next thing I know, I'm getting pushed under, you know, they're holding us down while I'm trying to breathe out of spare air. But it was crazy. I mean, just meeting those guys was just such a dream. And they were all so cool. Every single person there was incredibly nice, incredibly gracious. The US team was phenomenal. So, yeah. And then getting on the boat was insane because we go into the first practice day got canceled because I think it was too windy, or maybe there's no wind. I can't remember. So no practice day, straight into race day. And then they had all these.
You didn't have any practice.
No, straight into race day.
That's insane.
Right? And so race day, they're like, don't worry, you'll get an hour of practice before the first race. And I'm like, I'm shitting bricks. I'm like, an hour of practice? Like, that's nothing. Oh my God. And then they have these protected dolphins in the bay in New Zealand. And they end up not letting us sail around at all.
I remember.
Yeah, because of the marine mammals. Yeah. And I'm like, what do you mean we're not going to get this hour of practice before racing? And the next thing I know, they're like, okay, y'all have 15 minutes to sail the boat, and then you're racing. I'm like, oh my, like, I'm drenched in sweat, you know, that's insane, you know, and you're trying to like be cool, but then like there's cameras on you and stuff. And it was insane. I remember the boat gets up on the foil and it was just moving so fast. I'm used to fast boats, right? But like, 50 knots is like a whole other different level of fast, you know?
Yeah.
And Jimmy's like, okay, like, all right, go run across, you know, practice running across the boat, you know.
Wait, you hadn't even done that?
No, I hadn't even done that. Not while the boat was moving. Like on land, I ran back and forth like gazillion. And it's hard to run across on land. I mean, it's like a legit trampoline, you know? And I get up and I'm like, everything in my body is telling me, like, don't run across. Like, this is dangerous, you know, maybe crawl across, but don't run. Are you insane? You know? And it was like an out of body experience, just sprinting across that thing. And the boat's like moving so fast and the ground is so unstable. I mean, after the first couple times, it was like, okay, no big deal. But the first time I was like, I don't know if I'm coming out of this alive. It was unreal. so fast.
Your heart rate must have been through the roof on the 30 seconds to the start, right?
Oh
Do
my
you call the start tactics? I mean, how can you do that when you've never sailed on the boat?
Yeah, so it's tricky. There's also a lot of starting software that I don't know. I mean, I think some people who really understand SailGP know about it, but they basically tell you like where's the best point on the line to start. But I mean, achieving that realistically is kind of hard. But on the wing, there's this massive like flat screen TV, and it's giving you all these
Oh yeah, I
information
saw
from
that the
like
other day.
sail.
I saw there was a screen there. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, so it's kind of like showing you like how much time do you need to kill before the start, and we're doing all these calculations, and the biggest thing is just being aware of other boats, you know. So a lot of the
yeah.
times on the start, me and the wing trimmer would run across to the other side of the boat so we could have eyes to leeward to tell Jimmy when other boats were setting up and trying to help with timing and that kind of stuff. But yeah, no, it's the starting stuff is pretty difficult in that fleet, and you're
And
so close together.
you've got some very aggressive,
Yeah.
highly experienced
Oh my god.
drivers there who know they're on TV as well, and so
Hmm.
that's part of it. But
Yeah,
the Ben Ainsleys and all the other drivers. I mean, that's
it's crazy.
incredibly intimidating. I really enjoy it. I don't know if I'm not a sailing purist. I haven't done it for long enough. I don't know what people think about it, but I think it's a fascinating to watch.
Yeah,
I
it totally
really
is.
enjoy
And
it.
the reach starts are crazy too. I
Yeah.
mean, I had done a lot of reach starting, luckily, leading up to it in the 69Fs, which are the foiling monohulls, the 3-person ones. So I was really familiar with them. But I was like, thank God I had done all that reach starting practice, because otherwise you're not really doing it that much in the normal sailing that I'm doing. And for most foiling boats, like you don't want to reach. You know, that's like the no-no square. That's a little too fast. You know, I'd rather go upwind or downwind.
Hmm.
So, you know, the wing trimmer's working really hard, the flight controller's working really hard, and yeah, it's cool. It's a really interesting dynamic doing the reach starts for sure. It's cool for TV too. I think it's probably one of the
Oh,
main
it's
reasons
amazing.
they do
It's
it.
it is ridiculous. I'm curious about is the wind shadow for these boats the same as on the same size sort of conventional boats?
Yeah, you're still thinking about the wind shadow of other boats a lot, especially because it could cause you to drop off of the foil. And
Yeah,
the minute you drop off the foil, I mean, that's just like
you're toast.
that's game over. You know, you're
Yeah.
dead at that point. So yeah, there's a lot of anticipating different wind shadows, and you really want to keep your air clear to stay on the foil, especially in marginal stuff. Like super heavy wind, you can kind of get away with it, but
Mm.
marginal, game over. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So no different. Well, I suppose the difference is that right once you drop off the foil, there's
Yeah.
such a huge difference. Going around the marks, especially sort of that downwind mark,
Hmm.
that looks like there's G force as you go around the corner, right? I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
that,
The tax. I remember being on board the first tack we did, and the Canadian strategist. I had talked to her a couple weeks ago. I'd seen her in Pensacola or something, and she was like, "Hey, like my biggest advice to you is just tuck your hips into the cockpit when you do your first tack." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" Like, she's like, "You know, just like nestle in there because you're standing the whole time. You're not sitting or anything."
ah,
And I was like,
mm,
"Oh, okay." So I remembered her saying that, and I like tuck into the cockpit, kind of squat a little bit, so I'm kind of underneath it. And the G forces in the tack were so strong. It was like my vision narrowed the first time, and I felt like I was on one of those carnival rides where you're like stuck to
wow.
the wall, you know, because they spin
Yeah.
around. It was like knocked the wind out of you strong. The G forces in the turns, like you don't really see it on TV and when you're watching it on the broadcast. But the first time you experience it, and if you're not braced for it, it's like it'll just fling you straight out of the boat if you're not careful. Those are crazy. The turns too, like the roundups and stuff, those didn't feel as bad, but the tacks, because we're going through such a wide angle so quickly, and you don't want to lose speed and drop off the foil, are pretty aggressive for sure.
So I was interested that you said you stand.
Yep, yep. So the flight controller's sitting. They're pretty like crouched. They've got a little seat. Um, I'm standing. Jimmy's standing. But a lot of the times, as the strategist, you try to kind of get as small as you can because you don't want to create more windage.
Yeah.
Um, Same
Yeah.
with the grinders. You'll see them get on their knees sometimes because they're trying to be less windage, which really slows the boat down. So yeah, that's a consideration too.
As many as three, right?
Hmm.
you must have done New Zealand and Chicago. Do you do Chicago as well
Yeah.
and somewhere else, right?
Yeah, I did Chicago and San Fran as well. Yeah.
Were they completely different venues, so you had to learn it all over again, or was
No.
we able to get up the learning curve?
Yeah, I mean, the learning curve was great. It was also cool because I did the first event where there was actually a panel for the strategist. So my last event, I was doing like jib lead trim, and then I would steer the boat out of the maneuvers, and then I could also swap
Wow.
the rudders, and so it was neat. Like it was like I'm driving out of this tack, and now I'm reaching down and I'm pressing all these buttons, and like that was really cool because it felt like each time I got back on the boat, we were adding more responsibilities on, as well as like being a strategist, right? So looking around the race course and communicating that kind of stuff. It was cool to finally do some controls as well. Yeah.
We talked to a little bit ago about communication, right? And
Mm-hmm.
about it's very different when you have headphones on, and
Mm-hmm.
presumably you have no time to repeat something because by the time you repeated it, you're through the maneuver. Was that something to get used to as well, or when you're foiling, I suppose, with a crew with a teammate on another foiling boat, the speed's not the same, but
Mm-hmm.
the same imperative, right, to be able to communicate very quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for SailGP, we've got like the in-ear headsets, right? So they're like little earphones because the wind noise is so loud you couldn't talk to
Oh
someone
yeah.
even right next to you. But there's a lot of emphasis put on not clogging the comms. So if one person's talking on the airwave or whatever, the radio wave, someone else can't talk. So my job is to speak as quickly as I can and say as few words and take up as little time in that airwave as possible, so that if someone else has something really important to say, they can say it into the radios. So when you sail like the NACRA 17, or when I'll sail like the 69Fs, it's that same thing. We need to be like super succinct, and we want to say as few words as possible so it gets communicated really fast. So sometimes we'd almost have not code words, but words that meant something to everyone on the crew. So like SailGP, we'd have a playbook. So if we said this word, it meant, we're going to round this gate, right? Or we're going to jibe immediately or tack immediately. For the NACRAs and stuff, we would talk about like when we'd hit like our bottom angle or something. So that meant the driver's not going to steer any lower from there. And yeah, there's a lot of importance placed on how do we talk quickly and clearly, make sure everyone's on the exact same page. There's no time to be wishy-washy or have a conversation about something. It has to happen like immediately.
Hmm.
And that's the kind of thing that if I'm sailing a big keelboat isn't super applicable in light wind, but as the breeze gets heavier, it's harder to hear each other speaking, right? And you want to communicate super clearly to everyone on board. So I think that's a great thing to carry over, is how do I communicate clearly, have everyone on the same page? And another thing is, as you get physically exerted, it's harder to speak, right? Like it's harder to say stuff because your heart rate's so high, and it's even harder to control your tone. So you could come across as sounding like you're yelling at your teammate or something, but you're not, you're just exerted. So a lot of that's like, how do you get your heart rate down when you're communicating, and how do you, focus on tone at the same time as being succinct? And there's just, it's a total art form being able to communicate well on a boat, for sure.
So you have to consciously work on that
Oh yeah.
because I understand the problem. Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
So can we go back to your role as strategist? Because I'm fascinated by this. So I'm interested in the title, the word strategist versus tactician, because when you're entering the starting box, whatever they call it for SailGP,
Mm-hmm.
are you talking about which side of the course is better, or
Yeah.
does that all go to hell and it just becomes less of strategy like that and more about tactics as soon as you round that first mark?
Mm-hmm. So a lot of the strategies pre-start, because obviously it's a restart. So I guess the question is more, when do you jibe, right? Once you round that first mark. So
Yeah.
a lot of the time we would talk about how far away the ley line was going to be after that initial jibe down to the mark. If you could do one and in, or if you'd have to do two jibe, three jibes, or
Mm.
um, whatever. So yeah, I mean, the strategist is looking a lot more big picture, like where's the better pressure at, right? It's not as focused on immediate tactical decisions. So that was really cool, big picture kind of stuff. And then, I mean, still we were doing a lot of like making sure there were no collisions, that kind of stuff, because the blind spots on the boats are pretty significant when you're driving and you can't see a
Oh, they
good
are.
chunk.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of the times, like upwind, I would end up running maybe halfway across the boat to the pod or maybe all the way to the leeward side to make sure we weren't in danger of getting hit or hitting someone. And yeah.
He's coming at you at 50 knots.
Right. So like knowing how to call across, like
Oh my
that's
God.
so important. Like calling crosses is like the number one job on that
Yeah.
boat for sure. Mm-hmm.
On the TV, they do a very good job of showing ladder lines and ley lines and
Mm-hmm.
that sort of thing, which makes it very easy as a television viewer or I'm looking at YouTube really,
Mm-hmm.
to understand what's happening. But sometimes I wish they'd take that away from you, because then you get a much better idea of what's really, you have no idea where you are on the ladder line. Well,
Right.
not as accurately as you do on the. Are you sort of aware of that the video audience has that sort of picture of what's going on?
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, they miss a lot of like what's going on board the boats too. It's hard to cover so many boats in the fleet. I think there was a way, I'm sure it's still like this, but you could get the onboard camera of just one boat while you were
Oh, you can
watching
select.
SailGP. You can
Yeah,
select
it's
on the
true,
app.
because sometimes you can see out of the corner of your eye that
Mm-hmm.
the sort of German boat and the French boat are going to have a really tricky crossing,
Right.
but the camera hasn't really spotted that. You're like, what? I mean,
You're
it's
like,
very hard because there's so much action happening all over the
mm-hmm.
place. But
Yeah.
I think it's fantastic to watch. I really enjoy it. I look forward to
Mm-hmm.
it. I think they do a good job of making it a sort of a bit of a Grand Prix, given the people involved and so on. So
Definitely.
yeah. What was it like coming literally back down to earth or back down to water? Once you've done foiling, especially SailGP, when you return to keelboats or dinghies, and you said it feels like everything's a slow motion,
Mm-hmm.
but has the speed of events in foiling, especially SailGP, has that helped you think ahead? Does it improve the way that you've thought ahead? Does it improve what you're doing with keelboats and dinghies?
Yeah, totally. I mean, especially when you get on the ACAT, because up to that point, the faster boats that I was sailing was the ACAT, 69F, that kind of stuff. Um, and there are definitely moments on the A, especially when you're in breeze and it's wavy, where the boat gets really loose. Like she wants to crash down or shoot straight out of the water. And it's kind of scary during those moments. And everything feels like it's fast, like it's out of control. And then after doing SailGP, I got on the ACAT and I was like, God, this is easy. Like it's not easy, but it's safe and it's slow. You know what I mean? So that to me was just such a great learning, because the ACAT suddenly was not near as intimidating as it was. And it felt really manageable in breeze, which is an area I've kind of struggled in, because I'm one of the smaller guys. By guys, I'm a girl, but I'm one of the smaller people in the fleet, and in big breeze, that definitely makes a difference.
So has it helped you in big breeze?
Oh yeah, totally. I feel just like I'm still under control of the boat, but I just feel like the boat's going to do what I want for it to do all the time in
Yeah.
breeze now. Nothing feels scary anymore, which is great. It's a good thing.
Well, I love that. So, Cam, when it comes to preparing for a regatta, and it could be an ACAT regatta, it could be VX1 regatta, or SailGP, what is there a routine that you go through that has worked for you that you stick to?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's important, especially on the foiling boats, to become very athletic. And, the VX1 is still an athletic boat, and honestly, keel boats are too, especially if you're doing bow or something. So I think the really important thing is being physically prepared. Proper nutrition, proper hydration, mobility, stretching before you even get down to the boat park. So that's kind of where everything starts for me. And then just making sure your boat's set up, that you've done all the boat work, nothing's going to break. You really want to trust your boat and trust every piece of equipment on the boat. And like for me as a skipper sailing the ACAD or the NACRA, like I wanted to be responsible for every single little lashing on the boat, because I knew that I could trust what I was doing. When you get onto bigger boats like the F50 or a big monohull, you have to trust your teammates, right? So there's that whole component of it, is like believing in your team, but also believing in the importance of putting in proper prep work and proper time, setting the boat up and everything. So yeah, the foiling boats, I mean, it's constant boat work. Everything breaks, everything has a shelf life. You've got to make sure it's set up well, that your foils are tuned properly, the rig's tuned properly. So I care a lot about how the boat is set up, because it can just ruin your regatta. Like if something silly breaks, your tiller extension or your, I don't even know, a lashing on your main sheet block or something, you're out of the regatta. You only get so many throwouts. And I mean, I saw it at this past Worlds where just something broke on a boat and all of a sudden the World Championship's over, for that person. So it's very important to trust everything and focus on keeping it simple and correct.
Yeah, I've heard from quite a few people about the fact that there's meticulous preparation so that when you get on the boat or at the regatta for the day one, you've done everything possible to prepare for it, and
Mm-hmm.
that then liberates you to sort of concentrate on what's going to happen.
Absolutely.
I was talking to Dawn Riley last week or the week before, and she talks about visualization. That was a technique that she uses. I'm just curious about whether you use visualization techniques.
Hmm. I love the idea of it. It's not something I do a ton of, but I do really believe in, that mental component of sailing, right? Being in the right headspace. I love box breathing. I do quite a bit of that before each start, just to keep the heart rate nice and low and focused. And then sometimes when you're foiling and stuff gets scary, it gets sketchy, boat starts moving really fast, it's windy, flying too high, just making sure to take a deep breath and get your heart rate down is just so important. Like I spend a ton of time thinking about staying calm, dropping the heart rate. If I'm sailing with someone else, coming across as calm, because people feed off of your emotions. And that's a really, really important thing as a skipper, to keep everyone on board calm. So yeah, I love that she was talking about visualization, because I think that is a super good thing to implement, something that I can definitely add into my routine too.
Can you tell us about box breathing then?
Yeah, I think it was a Navy SEALs breathing technique. Fact check me on that, but it centers around kind of bringing your central nervous system, like, I don't know, getting it normal or back to equilibrium or whatever. But it's 4 counts in, and then you hold for 4, and then you exhale for 4, and then you hold empty for 4, and then you repeat that 4 times.
Oh,
And
that's
for
why it's a
me,
box. Yeah.
yep, it creates that box shape, and I love doing that pre-start. For me, the minute the gun goes, the 5-minute gun, I'm calm. Like I feel great, But those minutes leading up to it, especially like at a world championship, like 7 minutes till the start or something, like that's when you need to just get focused and just kind of focus. And I always think about, my dad always said it. He's always like, go out there and do your job, like get the job done. Don't have any excuses, That's kind of what I think about when I get out to race. It's just doing my job.
Your job very well, for sure.
Thanks.
Let's talk about a favorite leg of the course. And you and I talked earlier about this. And so downwind for you is, I think you've chosen as your favorite leg. So tell us about that. Why it's your favorite, what you do differently, perhaps.
Yeah, I've always loved downwinds. Even on monohulls, I've loved trimming spinnaker on downwinds, and I love taking advantage of each and every little wave, right? Like knowing those moments to focus. When I'm sailing the VX or the Viper or something, if I surf this wave a little bit better, then maybe I get like an inch better than my opponent. And over the course of this whole downwind leg, that's all going to add up. And the next thing you know, I've got inside overlap, and it's game over for that guy. So, like on the foiling boat, it's a little different, but not really. It's like, how can I focus as much as possible on the quality of my foiling? So, making sure that I'm hitting max speed and I'm staying at max speed as long as possible without having to go through that whole rebuild speed cycle situation. That's how you win those downwind legs. But at the same time, you've got to be super tactically aware of what's going on. Like, what's the breeze doing? What's your opponent's doing? How is the wave state changing? Is your sail trim right? All that kind of stuff. So I think a ton about prioritization, and picking moments to look around, right? picking those moments to focus outside of the boat and then picking others to focus inside of the boat. When I sailed the NACRA, my crew and I, we'd have like a communication where I'd be like, okay, your boat. And that meant I needed to look around and he needed to keep the boat foiling super well. He needed to just focus. We can't both be looking around at the same time. So that kind of thing happens as well on SailGP boats where, Jimmy will be like, I got to take a look around or something. Or I'll be like, Jimmy, look at this, and then everyone else will be focused on the in-boat stuff, keeping the boat moving fast while the helm's looking around. I think the VX one, we do the same thing upwind, same thing downwind, just communicating those moments of what your priority is to the rest of the people on the team.
I love your emphasis on maintaining boat speed as much as acquiring boat speed. That's critical for you, right? Especially, I suppose, in foiling. Obviously, if you come off the foils, you're toast, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, on foils too, you can foil, but you can foil slow. Just because the boat's out of the water doesn't mean that the boat's moving as fast as it possibly could be moving at that moment. I mean, on the foiling catamarans, we have differential. So that means that the windward rudder is essentially sucking the windward hull down. The leeward one's lifting it up. So the ACAT all of a sudden thinks I'm an 800-pound man. That's what righting moment is created by the rudders. So when that differential gets working, the faster and faster you go, the boat just locks in and gets ripping. But you have to pick those moments when you look around and all of a sudden the boat stops ripping and now you've got to rebuild everything totally. So I think it's just really important to prioritize. And then same on the keel boats and stuff too. Like when you're going downwind and you've got a nice wave surf happening, right? You're going for depth at that moment, knowing that moment to come back up and get a little bit more flow on the sails. It's all a feel thing, but it's also a communication thing of what you're intending to do and when you're looking around and all that kind of stuff. So important.
You're most comfortable sailing with one of the crew, or single-handed, or multi? Where's your preference?
I sail a lot single-handed, but I really do love sailing with other people. It gets pretty lonely on a single-handed boat. It's really only okay if you have like training partners and people to talk to. I mean, otherwise it's just like by yourself all the time. I do some F-18 sailing with the female crew, and I love that boat. But I've done a ton of three-person sailing. The Viper was kind of my main boat growing up on the Gulf Coast. It's the Gulf Yachting Association boat, so we compete against other yacht clubs in a Captiville kind of setting representing our yacht clubs. So honestly, probably the majority of my sailing has been double, probably triple-handed sailing on the Viper a ton.
Mm-hmm. And you prefer that to single-handed, yeah?
Yeah, definitely. As long as you and your crew get along. If y'all don't get along, then I would rather be by myself. It's important to get along with the other person. Otherwise, it's just miserable for everyone.
And so you were saying earlier you'd rather sail with somebody who you have a great relationship, great bond with, who may not be the best sailor. Is that am I characterizing that correctly?
Yeah, absolutely. I think crew chemistry is one of those things that you can work on, but if it's not initially there, it's never going to be there. So I think I'd rather sail with someone who I click with, I get along with, we mutually respect each other and grow as sailors together versus sailing with someone who's already a really good sailor, but maybe they've got a horrible ego or something, and you're constantly clashing on the boat. Like, I don't care if you're two of the best sailors in the world. If you don't get along, you're not going to get the boat around the race course properly,
So, thinking of egos, going back to SailGP, I mean, there must have been a bunch of egos in that room, right? Or on the course. I mean, that must have been interesting. I've got to ask. I've no idea whether Jimmy Spithill has a big ego or not. I don't know. But what was he like?
Man, he was just the nicest, kindest guy I've ever met. I've never seen someone just lead a team that effectively, and he was just respectful all the time. And even when we were in the shit, he was still just awesome teammate to have. It was just such an honor to sail with him. And honestly, everyone on that US team was amazing. Like every single person was super welcoming. It was everyone was focused and professional, right? But no one was mean, or there was none of that. Everyone was there to do their job and to get along while they were doing it. So, I mean, honestly, I didn't meet a single person in the entire league who wasn't incredibly welcoming and just fabulous sailor trying to help you learn. So it was great. Super positive experience.
When you think of the people involved and the little I know about them, they seem to be a good set of people. Um, and it feels sometimes that the SailGP tries to create drama. I don't know if that's because of they're trying to get an audience and it's good for social media. You know, one of the guys talked about, hey, the next generation. He implied the next generation really needs
Yeah. I
show
saw
what they
that.
could do, and there's sometimes you know, I think Ainsley was in clashes a couple of times on the, in high pressure moments on the
Mm-hmm.
mic with sort of a hot mic, but
Totally.
that felt quite artificial. Actually, didn't feel real. What was your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I understand they've want to increase viewership. It's the same as like Formula One and their drive to survive kind of stuff, right? I mean, at the end of the day, the sailing world is small, and then that top chunk of high performance sailors is really, really small. Like
Yeah.
everyone's been on a team with everyone else at least one point in their sailing career,
Oh
and
yeah,
everyone's
yeah,
friends at the end of the day. Like you
yeah,
don't want to make enemies with anyone because you'll probably get on a boat with them in the next year, and for the most part, everyone kind of gets along, which is good.
yeah,
But it is high stress, right? Like those high stress situations can bring out the worst in people, right?
yeah.
So a lot of that is about managing that and being aware of, what your words do to other people and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you throw in those questionable umpire calls sometimes, and that just leads to. I know I can imagine it.
Yeah.
The pressure's enormous. Do you squeeze boat speed out of your boats that other people don't? I mean, obviously you are. Um, how do you know how you're doing that? Is it obvious to you what you're doing differently?
I think a ton about boat speed. I think it's one of the more important parts of racing sailboats, right? Because you can get away with a lot of bad stuff if you're sailing fast. Can get you out of sticky situations. Um, I spend a lot of time training with my Vacaros or speed instrument. So I spend a lot of time creating feel, like seeing how fast I'm going. If I can hit my polars upwind, if I'm sailing the Viper or the VX or something, like in my head, the front of my mind is just constantly like searching for speed. I'm always searching for speed. Like I can't let it go. So for me, like I'm always keeping flow when I'm sailing, especially if I'm sailing in chop, that kind of stuff's so important. And I'm always thinking about flow in the sense that not just like flow where it'll create lift kind of in the vertical sense, like while I'm foiling, the faster I go, the more I'm going to foil, right? The better I'm going to foil. But I'm also thinking about it's going to get me like up the race course, up the ladder rungs if I'm sailing a keelboat or something, just maintaining flow, getting those foils to work really well. But yeah, I'm always trying to squeeze every tenth of a knot of speed out of the boat. That's all I'm really thinking about for a good chunk of the race, for sure.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that. So you're always searching, looking ahead, searching for that extra bit of speed out of the boat. That's fascinating. Yeah, yeah,
Mhm. Yeah,
yeah,
I mean, a lot of
yeah,
it's just like focus and your
yeah.
ability to focus on the right things at the right time. But like ideally, if I've got someone else looking around the boat and I'm sailing like the Viper or something, I would love to just look at that speedo and just lock in,
Mm.
really get the boat up and ripping. And once I've got it in a nice stable spot at the right speed, that's the moment that I can kind of look around and, decide what to do next. But boat speed is just, it's so important, for sure.
Speed first before
Yeah.
anything. Yeah,
I mean, starts
yeah,
first, right? Because
yeah,
way easier to do tactics if you're in first, looking behind you. But yeah, if you didn't have the best start or you did have the best start, then you focus on the speed for sure. But yeah, love boat speed. Favorite part of sailing is just
yeah.
seeing how consistent I can get the boat moving fast. So.
Well, Cam, this has been a fascinating conversation. I knew it would be, but this is amazing. You have a ridiculous resume already of sailing and achievement. So, congratulations. I can only imagine what you're going to go on to do from here for sure. So, thank you so much for spending time with Sailfast. I really appreciate it. And the very best of luck with the season coming up and the World Championships. And I can't wait to see what you do this year and beyond.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Pete. I really, really enjoyed it.
Wonderful stuff. Thank you very much.